Carl Jung once worked with a patient who had spent decades caring for everyone around her. She was a wife, a mother, a confidant to friends who called only when they needed something. She had no hobbies, no desires of her own. When Jung asked her what she wanted from life, she could not answer. She had never been asked. And more than that, she had never asked herself. For years, she existed as a function, not a person. Then one day, she stopped showing up. She stopped answering the phone. She stopped accommodating the endless needs of those around her. When Jung saw her again, she was different. Not angry, not depressed, simply indifferent. He asked her what had changed. She said nothing had changed. She had simply stopped pretending. Jung recognized this as the final stage of individuation, the moment when the individual stops performing a version of themselves that was built to please others and begins to live from their own center. For the empath, this moment is not a choice, it is a psychic necessity. The empath, who has given too much for too long, reaches a breaking point. And on the other side of that breaking point is not bitterness, not rage, but something far more unsettling to those who benefited from their care. It is the complete withdrawal of energy. The empath stops caring. And when they do, entire relational structures collapse. There is a day when the empath stops caring. It does not arrive with fanfare. There is no announcement, no turning point that can be marked on a calendar. It happens quietly, in the space between one conversation and the next. The empath who once absorbed every emotion in the room, who twisted themselves into accommodating shapes, who gave until there was nothing left, simply stops. They stop explaining. They stop defending. They stop trying to make people understand. And in that cessation, something shifts. Not bitterness, not rage, something colder and far more final, indifference. Jung would recognize this moment, not as apathy, but as the culmination of individuation. The empath has moved through the stages of awakening. They have confronted their shadow. They have withdrawn their projections. They have integrated the parts of themselves that were buried beneath years of people-pleasing and self-abandonment. And now, in this final stage, they arrive at a place where the opinions, demands, and emotional turbulence of others no longer penetrate. They have become psychologically sovereign. And sovereignty, to those who benefited from the empath's porousness, looks like cruelty. But it is not cruelty, it is completion. The empath has finally stopped mistaking other people's needs for their own responsibility. They have stopped believing that love requires self-erasure. They have stopped performing empathy as a social function and have learned to reserve it for those who reciprocate. The rest of the world, the ones who took without giving, the ones who demanded without appreciating, the ones who guilt-tripped and manipulated, are met with something they have never encountered from the empath before. Nothing. No reaction. No engagement. No energy. This is what Jung meant when he spoke of the withdrawal of libido. Libido, in Jungian terms, is not merely sexual energy, but psychic energy in general. It is the force that animates a person's engagement with the world. For years, the empath has directed this energy outward, pouring it into relationships, into fixing, into soothing, into managing the emotional states of everyone around them. They believed this was their purpose. They believed this was love. But the psyche does not sustain imbalance indefinitely. Eventually, it corrects. The libido withdraws from external objects and turns inward. The empath stops caring about the people who never cared about them, and this withdrawal is not a conscious decision. It is an involuntary response to prolonged depletion. The people on the receiving end of this withdrawal often react with shock. They cannot understand why the empath has changed. They accuse the empath of being cold, distant, selfish. They claim the empath is no longer the person they once knew. And they are correct. The person they once knew was a construction. a persona built to avoid rejection, to keep the peace, to earn love through utility. That persona has collapsed. What remains is the actual person, the one who was buried beneath the conditioning. And this person does not need their approval. Jung described the persona as the mask one wears to navigate the social world. For the empath, the persona was one of infinite patience, endless understanding, and boundless availability. This mask was rewarded. It earned the empath a place in other people's lives, even if that place was one of servitude. But the persona is not the self. The self is the deeper, truer center of the psyche, and it cannot be sustained through performance. The empath who stops caring has shed the persona. They are no longer interested in playing the role. They are no longer willing to pretend that one-sided relationships are acceptable. They have seen the pattern clearly, and they have chosen to step out of it. This stepping out is experienced by others as abandonment. But the empath is not abandoning anyone. They are simply refusing to continue a dynamic that was never mutual. The people who depended on the empath's emotional labor are now forced to confront their own inner lives, their own unresolved feelings, their own need for external validation. This confrontation is uncomfortable. And rather than face it, many of them blame the empath. They project their discomfort onto the one who stopped absorbing it. They call the empath heartless, when in truth, the empath has simply reclaimed their heart. Jung spoke often of projection, the unconscious process by which people attribute their own unacknowledged qualities to others. The empath, in their unhealed state, becomes a repository for these projections. Others see in the empath what they cannot see in themselves. Patience, compassion, the capacity to hold pain without collapsing. The empath accepts these projections because they have been taught that this is their role. But when the empath stops accepting them, when they refuse to be the container for other people's disowned emotions, the projections fall back onto their originators. And this return is experienced as a loss. The empath who has stopped caring does not gloat. They do not seek revenge. They do not engage in the drama of explaining why they have withdrawn. They simply move forward. They redirect their energy toward their own life, their own healing, their own becoming. The people who were once central to their existence fade into the periphery, not out of malice, but out of clarity. The empath has realized that these people were never truly present. They were present for what the empath could provide, not for who the empath was. And once the provision stops, so does the relationship. This realization is both devastating and liberating. Devastating because it reveals the extent of the illusion. The empath believed they were loved. What they were, in most cases, was useful. Liberating because once the illusion is seen, it loses its power. The empath no longer needs to chase connection with people who only valued their function. They are free to build relationships based on mutuality, on respect, on genuine care. And these relationships, though fewer, are real. Jung believed that individuation required the integration of opposites. For the empath, this means integrating the capacity to care with the capacity to stop caring. It means recognizing that empathy without boundaries is not a virtue. It is self-destruction. The healed empath learns to discern. They learn to offer their energy where it is honored and to withdraw it where it is exploited. This discernment is not selfishness, it is wisdom. The day the empath stops caring is the day they stop believing that their worth is tied to their usefulness. They stop measuring themselves by how much they can endure, how much they can forgive, how much they can give. They recognize that these metrics were imposed on them by a world that benefits from their self-sacrifice, and they reject those metrics entirely. The empath begins to ask different questions. Not how much can I give, but how much am I willing to lose of myself? Not how can I make this work, but is this worth my energy? Not why are they treating me this way, But why am I allowing it? These questions mark a shift in consciousness. The empath is no longer operating from a place of unconscious compliance. They are awake. They see the patterns. They see how people use guilt to extract care. They see how people weaponize the empath's sensitivity against them. They see how entire relationships have been built on the empath's willingness to tolerate what should not be tolerated. And once they see it, they cannot unsee it. The veil has lifted. The empath knows the truth, and the truth makes caring impossible. There is a specific quality to the indifference that arrives in this final stage. It is not the hot indifference of anger, the kind that still carries emotional charge, that still seeks validation or vindication. It is cold. It is complete. The empath no longer feels the need to prove that they were wronged. They no longer need the other person to acknowledge the harm. They no longer wait for apologies that will never come. They have moved beyond the need for closure from external sources. The closure happened internally. The empath closed the door themselves. Jung would say this is the moment the individual stops projecting their need for wholeness onto others. The empath, in their unhealed state, believed that if they could just make the other person understand, if they could just explain their pain clearly enough, if they could just love hard enough, then the relationship would balance. But this belief is a projection. It assumes that the other person has the capacity or the willingness to meet the empath where they are, and in most cases, they do not. The empath was waiting for something that was never going to arrive. When they finally accept this, the waiting stops. And with it, the caring. This acceptance is not resignation, it is clarity. The empath sees the situation for what it is, not for what they wished it could be. They see the other person for who they are, not for who the empath needed them to be. And in that seeing, the empath releases the fantasy that this person will change, the fantasy that this relationship will become mutual, the fantasy that their care will eventually be returned. These fantasies kept the empath invested. Once they dissolve, so does the investment. What replaces the fantasy is a kind of neutrality. The empath no longer loves the person, but they do not hate them either. They simply do not think about them. The person who once occupied so much space in the empath's mind, who dominated their emotional landscape, who was the subject of endless rumination and analysis, becomes irrelevant. The empath's attention turns elsewhere, not to another person, but to themselves, to their own life, their own healing, their own growth. The energy that was once directed outward in a futile attempt to change or fix or save someone else is redirected inward. And this is where the transformation deepens. Jung spoke of the process of individuation as a turning inward, a movement away from the collective and toward the self. For the empath, this inward turn is the final stage. They have spent so long oriented toward others, so long measuring their worth by external feedback, so long shaping themselves according to the needs and expectations of the people around them. The withdrawal of care is the withdrawal of that orientation. The empath stops looking outside for validation, for love, for proof of their value. They begin to cultivate these things within themselves. This cultivation is not easy. The empath has been conditioned to believe that self-focus is selfish, that prioritizing their own needs is wrong, that they are only worthy if they are giving. These beliefs run deep. They are not dismantled overnight, but the process has begun. The empath starts small. They say no without explanation. They cancel plans without guilt. They remove themselves from conversations that drain them. They stop answering messages from people who only reach out when they need something. Each of these acts is a reclamation. The empath is taking back the energy they gave away. They are rebuilding the boundaries that were eroded over years of compliance. The people who benefited from the empath's boundarylessness do not respond well to this rebuilding. They test the boundaries. They push, they guilt, they accuse. They claim the empath has changed, as if change is inherently bad. But the empath, in this final stage, is unmoved. They have stopped caring what these people think. They have stopped trying to manage other people's reactions to their self-respect. They understand now that the discomfort others feel is not their responsibility. It is the natural consequence of a dynamic that was always unsustainable. Jung described the integration of the shadow as essential to individuation. For the empath, the shadow includes all the qualities they were taught to suppress: the anger, the selfishness, the refusal, the coldness. These qualities are not inherently negative. They are protective. They are necessary. The empath who integrates the shadow no longer fears being called selfish. They recognize that self-preservation is not selfishness. They no longer fear being called cold. They recognize that boundaries are not cruelty. They have reclaimed the parts of themselves that were demonized, and in doing so, they have become whole. This wholeness is what allows the empath to stop caring. They are no longer fragmented by the need to please, to accommodate, to keep the peace. They are integrated. They know who they are. They know what they will accept and what they will not, and they trust themselves enough to act on that knowledge. This trust is the foundation of sovereignty. The empath is no longer looking to others to tell them what is acceptable, what is right, what is kind. They have their own inner authority, and that authority is final. The world does not know what to do with a sovereign empath. The empath who once bent to every demand is now immovable. The empath who once absorbed every emotion now deflects. The empath who once gave endlessly now rations their care with precision. This is disorienting to those who knew the old version. They cannot reconcile the person in front of them with the person they remember, and so they reject the new version. They call it fake, performative, a defense mechanism. But it is none of those things. It is the truth. The empath is finally being themselves, and themselves does not include tolerating mistreatment. The final stage of the empath's awakening is not marked by transformation into something new. It is marked by the cessation of pretending to be something they were never meant to be. The empath who stops caring has not become heartless. They have become honest. They have stopped lying to themselves about the nature of their relationships. They have stopped making excuses for people who do not reciprocate. They have stopped sacrificing their peace for the comfort of others. And in this stopping, they discover something they had forgotten: themselves. Jung understood that the self is not built, it is uncovered. The empath spent years burying the self beneath layers of accommodation, compliance, and performance. The process of individuation is the process of removing those layers. It is excavation, not construction. And what is uncovered is not always pleasant. There is anger, there is grief. There is the sharp pain of recognizing how much time was lost, how much energy was wasted, how many people took without ever intending to give. But there is also relief. Relief in the absence of pretense. Relief in the permission to stop performing, relief in the realization that the empath does not owe anyone access to their inner world. The people who truly matter will respect the boundaries. The people who do not will reveal themselves through their resistance. And the empath, in this final stage, is no longer afraid of that revelation. They welcome it, because every person who cannot accept the empath's boundaries is a person the empath no longer needs to carry. This is the uncomfortable truth Jung recognized. Healing does not make a person easier to be around. It makes them harder to manipulate. The empath who stops caring has integrated their shadow. They have reclaimed the parts of themselves that were labeled as selfish, as cold, as wrong. They have learned that saying no is not cruelty, that walking away is not failure, that protecting their energy is not heartlessness. These capacities were always within them. They were simply suppressed in service to a version of love that required their disappearance. The final stage is not about becoming invulnerable. The empath still feels. They still care deeply about the people and causes that align with their values, but they no longer care indiscriminately. They no longer pour themselves into voids. They no longer mistake depletion for devotion. They have learned the difference between compassion and complicity, and they have chosen compassion for themselves. Jung called this the realization of the self. It is the moment when the individual stops living according to external scripts and begins to live from their own center. For the empath, this center was buried so deep that it took years of pain to uncover it. But once uncovered, it is unshakable. The empath knows who they are. They know what they will tolerate and what they will not. They know their worth is not determined by how much they give or how much they endure. And they know that the people who cannot accept this were never meant to stay. There is a loneliness in this stage. The empath who stops caring often finds themselves alone, not because they have pushed everyone away, but because most people were only there for what they could extract. When the extraction stops, so does the presence. But this loneliness is not emptiness, it is spaciousness. It is the room the empath needs to finally hear their own voice, to finally live according to their own truth. And in that spaciousness, the empath becomes whole, not because they have shut down, but because they have opened up to themselves. They have stopped abandoning their own needs in favor of everyone else's. They have stopped believing that their value lies in their utility. They have stopped performing a version of love that required their suffering. They are free. And freedom, though it arrives quietly, is the most profound transformation of all. The empath who stops caring is not lost. They are found. They have returned to themselves after years of exile. They have remembered that they are not here to be endlessly available, endlessly understanding, endlessly forgiving. They are here to live, to protect their energy, to honor their boundaries, to choose carefully who gets access to their inner world. And, in making these choices, they step fully into their sovereignty. The opinions of others no longer dictate their actions. The guilt no longer controls them. The fear of rejection no longer keeps them silent. They have walked through the fire and emerged on the other side. And what they carry with them now is not bitterness, not hatred, not vengeance. It is peace. The peace of knowing they will never again abandon themselves for anyone. If this is your truth, type in the comments. I no longer carry what was never mine to hold. Claim it, let it be final.